You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, everyone. As you know, Kristen and I are out there reading and vetting books. We only have bestsellers on this show. A lot of times we do the advanced reader's copy. We're a little later in the game here, but we fell in love with this book by Laurie Frankel, and we begged her to come on the show. We're thrilled to have you here with us today, Laurie.
Thank you. Me too. I'm thrilled to be here.
For our YouTube watchers and everyone else, we're holding up the cover. It's called Family. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Family. And we really adored it. Before we get started, let me tell our listeners a little bit about you, because you've got a very cool bio here. You've done quite a bit in your career. You are a New York Times best-selling and award-winning author of 5 novels now. I hope you're getting ready for another one, because we love it.
Thank you.
Your writing has appeared in places like the New York Times, The Guardian, Washington Post, Poets and Writers, Publishers Weekly, People Magazine, the Sydney Morning Herald. I could go on and on. You're the recipient of the Washington State Book Award and the Endeavor Award, 2 very prestigious awards. Your novels have been translated now, I hear, into more than 25 languages. You've been optioned for film and TV. What more can you possibly do? You're a former college professor. We're happy that it's former, because now you're writing full-time in Seattle, Washington. So happy you're with us today. Because of course we're East Coast, and you live there with your family. And I like this a lot, where you make a really good soup. I'm dying to hear more about the soup, because I am a soup lover. Kristen, you too?
Absolutely.
And my take on soup is it's a beautiful thing, because unlike baking, which is exact, you can throw anything into a soup and it turned out fabulous.
Yep, that's exactly why. That's how I write, and that's how I cook. So that is exactly my argument. And it lets you clean out your refrigerator, because whatever's in there goes in your soup.
I love it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Laurie, we're here to talk about family, as Chris said, and we just adored this book. It gave us so much to talk about and think about. And before we get started, I'd love to give our listeners just some background of what's going on in the story. I promise not to give away any spoilers.
Okay.
And at the end, if you want to add anything, please, by all means, do so. Now, in the story, we meet India Allwood. She is a very famous actress, and she wasn't always that way, of course. She was a shy 16-year-old, a little awkward. She worked her way to Broadway, and now she is a TV superhero. But she had a lot of life experience in between some of those seminal moments. Now, her new movie is a big one about adoption. And she covers kind of the usual story that you might think about adoption, where there's a lot of heartache, there's a lot of perhaps regret and tragedy. Now, in real life, she is an adoptive mom, and she starts to feel like maybe there's more to the adoption story than her movie portrays. So when she gets interviewed by the press, she tells the truth. Maybe the movie's not so great, and there is a bigger and sometimes more beautiful and heartwarming story that's not told. So this starts a furor in the press, and her children decide that they're going to help her maybe, reclaim her image and fix some of the things that she's saying.
Right.
But everything goes a little bit haywire. And I love the fact that in this story, we see that families, they're beautiful in all their forms, and they're also very complicated. Did you want to add anything to that background?
No, you did great. That's perfect. That's really good. And yes, that was my idea going into it. Families are quite diverse. They can look all sorts of different ways. There's much that is wonderful about family, but they are really, really complicated. Even the most blood related typically presenting family is really, really complicated. And so the thing that happens sometimes where we think of family as being kind of like less than or settled for because they are not that like perfect blood related typical family seems sort of ridiculous to me because all families are really quite complicated, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing, but it also doesn't seem to me that it like serves anyone to be pretending otherwise.
But isn't it true? Because when we look at other families, it seems to us that they're a perfect family because we're not living inside that family. And that was my first note to the readers, is that thank you, Laurie, for reminding us of this. Families are messy, but they can still be perfectly wonderful in the messiness. I loved India. She was questioned about placing her child up for adoption, and she uttered some very wise words. She said, hard? Not really. Sad? Sometimes. Or maybe not even sad, because I know the life she got is so much better than the one she'd have had with me. And also, the life I got is better than the one I would have had with her. As the author of what I'm going to call a very important story, why were life choices outside of the supposed norm perceived as unsatisfying and even sorrowful? We all think this right away when they weren't. And do you think we're growing into a society that accepts every kind of family? Because let's face it, today we have families in every beautiful shape and size. Are we there yet, or not quite there?
I think maybe not quite there, but I absolutely think we're moving in that direction on the front of different kinds of families and all sorts of diversity, all sorts of different kinds of and outside of the box of and wider ranges of normal. I think this is what I'm always on about in all of these books is wider ranges of normal makes the world a better place for everyone. And I think that people are starting to see that in lots and lots of ways, but not in all ways yet. And of course, not at the same time. So I do think we're moving in that direction. Do I wish we were moving there a little more quickly? Yes, but I am cheered. I'm optimistic. I think that we are moving in that direction of wider ranges of normal on lots of different fronts, and I think that's a really good thing. And to answer the first part of your question, I think this is what novels suit up for, is to explore those kind of knee-jerk reactions, the assumptions that we've made without even necessarily realizing it, to look at the ways in which it's more complicated than it's been presented. It's something other than happy or sad, glad or disappointed. It's all of those things. It's both it's and of course it is, but it's going to take some exploration. It's going to take some looking closely at. And I think, well, great. That's why you need 400 pages in 10 hours of your life. Like that's what novels are for.
So true. And, I think that every one of our listeners, and I am, and how about you, Kristen? We have adoptions in my family, in my extended family, my aunts and uncles, my sister-in-law. And I'm here to tell you that everyone is better because of it. So I know in the 60s and the 70s, things were perceived differently. And I'm with you, Laurie. I just hope, and it's because of books like this, then we can move into a little more wiser future of understanding.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think that's true. I think that lots and lots of families have experiences of adoption, have adoption in them somewhere. One of the ideas we have that's inaccurate is that this is really very rare, and it isn't. And that most families are this like man and woman get together heterosexually and physically create a baby, and that everything else is aberrant. In fact, that's not even the majority anymore. So I think like super. Let's talk about all these other things.
I love it.
Now, our protagonist, India, touches on a subject that I think divides a lot of families. And I want to read a quote from her. She says, "One of the things that family is famous for is giving unsolicited advice, telling you things you'd rather not hear but need to, providing the perspective only people who've known you best and longest can." Now, why do you think that long-term perspective is important in providing insights to somebody in your family? Are they able to take into consideration maybe your strengths and weaknesses over time?
Yeah, yes, I think it's funny because I think that one of the things is that as we start to talk about different kinds of families, we get a little bit romantic about them. And we start to say things like, oh, we're so close. She's my best friend. She's like a sister to me, as if we're all really very close with our sisters when our sisters actually, sometimes drive us up a wall. And the reasons, and it seems to me that family is who you're stuck with, really, for better and for worse. And sometimes those are people you're related to, and sometimes they're not, but they are definitely people who can tell you the truth because you're not going to kick them out of bed. Do you know what I mean? Like, they are people who are going to be by your side no matter what. And one of the things that makes them is really difficult people, because they're people who are going to tell you the truth when you don't want to hear it. There are people who remember you before you arrived at the position or the life experience which you are espousing at present. These are the people who are going to remind you, well, no, because I remember that thing that happened when you were in fourth grade, and it's really embarrassing, and you're hoping I forgot, but I didn't forget. And actually, I'm going to bring it up at every opportunity and apply it to all sorts of things. And I think, yep, that's what family is. That's the definition I want to posit for family. And it's not like that's all upside, because it isn't. It absolutely isn't.
Yeah, and it's often the hardest to take that advice too from family. And Chris and I have talked about this on the show in the past. We see a lot of families where, the children, adult children aren't talking to their parents and vice versa
Right.
because unsolicited advice was provided.
Yeah.
So, it's a very big topic.
It's hard. It's really hard. And sometimes that hard is good, and sometimes it is not.
I just said the other day to a younger friend of mine that there's a saying that says, if you spoke to your friends the same way that you speak to your family, you wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah,
This is so true, right?
it's so true. Absolutely.
Well, I also appreciate your portrayal of some of the youth and children in your story. You showed them as smart, savvy, finding joy despite unusual circumstances. And you actually showed us two distinct viewpoints. I liked that too. Number one, kids are more malleable than adults. You'll be stunned at what a kid can get over. Truth.
Mhm.
Number two, you are never too young to remember trauma. There are some things you will never get over. Another truth.
Mhm.
So, for your characters and for all of us, which is both true?
Yeah, I think both is true. This too, I think, is what novels suit up for, is trying to pull apart these things where you think this thing is true and this opposite thing is also true. And how can both of those things be true at the same time? And the answer is like, well, I can tell you, but it's not going to be a social media post. It's not a TikTok. I'm going to need more than 30 seconds. It's a novel. It's character and relationships and situations, and puzzling these things out, and seeing what happens when you live in a place when a thing and the opposite thing are both true at the same time. So yeah, I think that falls into the same category as families. It's complicated, but that doesn't invalidate it. If anything, I think it adds more validity to it. But yeah, short answer, yes, both. I think almost always, yes, both.
And I felt a little like you were trying to show us that, listen, we are all different. We are not supposed to be the same. Relationships are different. People are different. Maybe there is no right or wrong. And we need to stop looking at that in that same way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we need to stop considering as less than things which don't live up to this supposed right, because that supposed right doesn't exist. I mean, not only are we all different, we are ourselves different from, moment to moment. And certainly, as in this, like, we see India grow up. We meet her when she's 16, and we are with her for 16 years. None of us are the same as we were when we were 16, unless we are, say 16 still.
I,
You change a lot over the course of a lifetime, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
yeah, so true.
I thought your story also offered a very beautiful introspective on the importance of mindset and perspective. Now, in your story, India's mother was very logical, and that's how she evaluated options. But India chose to do something a little different. She looked at things in a very positive light. For example, the chance to view some of the events in her life as a way to have more love and share love and bring joy and love to other people. And I won't get too specific, but this mindset really helped her process events in her life and even loss or trauma. So I want to ask you about that. Is that something we can teach young people easily? This idea of having an open and positive mindset? Or, how did she develop it in this situation? Because she didn't have a mother who modeled it for her.
I think I want to break up your question because I think, can we teach them? Yes. Can we teach them easily? Probably not, which I actually think is true of so many of the things we're trying to pass on to our kids. We can teach them, but gosh, it's hard. It's definitely not easy. I do think that modeling that, especially that kind of thing, modeling positivity and looking at things differently and trying to consider other perspectives and other people's perspectives is a really good thing to model for kids. For sure, I think that. But I also think that too is really, really hard. And pretending otherwise is probably not serving any of us. And I certainly think that when things are really difficult, adding to things being difficult, oh, and also you need to be positive about it, is asking a lot of kids and of adults, and particularly of kids interacting with adults and vice versa. And that it is also sometimes, I don't know, both healthy and reasonable to say, like, yeah, that's kind of terrible. And it's okay to acknowledge that it's kind of terrible. And I think what's difficult is sort of telling the difference between those times and the times when, okay, but if you just thought of this a little bit differently or approached it a little bit differently and, did some work to mitigate some aspects of this, maybe it wouldn't be so terrible. Some of the work I think is in telling the difference.
Yeah, I love what you said too, because you really made me think about empathy and teaching that with our young children, because we may have those different viewpoints, and even as parents we instill different values in our children, but a fundamental one of empathy and respect can go along with any viewpoint, almost any, I should say. Yeah,
Could I
very
add a
nice.
little interjection? Because before we close, I don't think it's giving a spoiler, but the very last line of the book was my favorite line. You probably already know it. It's about India. She got a standing ovation. Not her first, but also not her last. Or maybe she was just getting up to clear the table. I just love that. It summed it up.
Yeah.
In a crazy way, it summed it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do try.
Well, Laurie, this has been fantastic talking about this book, Family, Family. And you'll get the title when you read the book. It is just wonderful. And it's also entertaining and all of the things that we've been talking about today. So thank you so much. Now, before we let you go, can you share what's on your radar? What might be coming up next
For me,
for you?
I'm working on the next one. I'm always working on the next one. I think the novels are really daunting. And so I find that if I don't start the next one almost immediately, I think I have no idea how to write a novel. It's just, they're so long. They take me such a long time. So I always start the next one pretty much, like usually in the afternoon. Like I'll finish one and then I break for lunch and then I start the next book. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, that's very exciting. We hope you come back to talk about it.
Thank you. I hope so too. I would love to. Thank you so much for doing this. This is a delight. You all are charming and delightful.
Wonderful. And we'll tell our listeners too, real quick, how to get in touch with you. You have a fantastic website, Laurie Frankel, and it's LaurieFrankel.net. They can find you there, and they can find you with the occasional newsletter they can sign up for, Instagram, X, Facebook. And thank you again, Laurie. You have a wonderful day, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah, I love talking to Laurie Frankel. This is, I guess, as you and I being mothers, this book hits sort of hard in a lot of different ways. And I really could relate to it. There was one thing we didn't really get to talk a lot about, and I wanted to ask you what you thought. India had to let some people go out of her life in order to arrive. And she said, thank you for knowing the only way I could get there is if you didn't come. Thank you for making sure I arrived by letting me go. I thought that was a very wise and heartfelt statement. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking too in book terms, and that is we have chapters in our life where there's
Mhm.
people who come into our lives for a season and, you know, maybe we outgrow them or they're not healthy, they cross some boundaries, but they taught us something about ourselves and helped us maybe develop boundaries. So I think we have to be thankful for that. So again, that goes back to that open mindset that we were talking about that India espouses in this book. And I really admired that in her. She chose to look at things, even when they were traumatic or difficult, in a positive way. And, you know, it's not all positive, obviously. There's things she acknowledged that were hurtful, but she chose to try to find something good in it. And I think it's the same with people who come in and out of our lives.
I like that. And I couldn't stop thinking about that last line of the book. And I had to say something to Lori because, I just think it sums up life. Like we think we have to do everything for a standing ovation. India, she got a standing ovation. Not her first, but also not her last, because she was a Broadway actress in film, or maybe she just got up to clear the table. And just as a woman, career, mother, grandmother, wife, I just thought, it's okay sometimes if we're just living our lives. It doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be extraordinary. It can be the simple things. And I don't know why. I just thought that was like a little gem.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a pretty cool end to the story. Although we'll take the standing ovations right now, Chris,
Yes, we
right?
like that too. Here we are in podcast world all over the world. Obviously, we like to be heard.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take this time then to tell our listeners about some of the authors we have coming up. We actually have signed several today, but here's just a little snippet of who we have. Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado with Fatal Intrusion, Amy Runyon with Mademoiselle Eiffel, Shelley Noble, The Colony Club, Jessica Strawser, Catch You Later, Fran Littlewood, Amazing Grace Adams. We have M.P. Woodward writing for the Tom Clancy franchise, Shadow State, Robert Dugoni, Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, Michael Ledwidge, No Safe Place, Linda Cohen Loigman, The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern, and many, many more. So tune in. We have you in 90 different countries and territories, all 50 states, and more than 1,900 cities, loyal listeners. We love it. We thank you. We hope that you share the word and send around those links. And we just thank you for being on this journey with us. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.